Welcome to Healthy Living. We're so glad you joined us. I'm Lori Johnson, and my special guest today is Dr. A.J. Seth, author of the new book, Rewired, which is a fantastic read. Welcome, Dr. Seth.
Thank you for having me.
Now, this book, I wanted to tell our viewers right away, is very user-friendly, even though you're a physician, and this book is all about what I consider a miraculous journey. It's really something that everyday people can understand. And really the bottom line for this whole story, in my opinion, is it's inspirational because it really brought together the right people at the right time, and they rose to the occasion. What's your take on what happened here with you and your amazing patient, Melissa Loomis, and how you made her the most advanced amputee in the world?
Thank you for the compliments first. And like you said, the book is basically a story. That's what it is. It's kind of an incredible feeling to think and see, looking back on how this all happened, going from adversity to being on top of the mountain. You think and realizing how did you get there, and the little miracles that happened to get us to that peak of the mountain. And the entire time I felt like we were on a little train going up that mountain that I had no control over. For some reason, we're in a small town and 17,000, 18,000 people in North Canton, Ohio. And how did we get put onto this train to perform a miracle? And it just felt like we were being guided up this mountain. And I always say, God, 51%, and Melissa, who's an incredible patient, did 49%. All I did was one day in an OR just put a bunch of nerves together, and I think it's something most people can do. I just, for some reason, happened to be put onto that train.
Well, I love, for one thing, you're a physician and you're a man of science, and it's wonderful to see a person of your stature who embraces his faith. And that's probably something really refreshing to our viewers as well. And you do give God the glory. Talk a little bit about the faith angle before we get into the nuts and bolts of this amazing story.
It was almost like seeing it firsthand. When you're in medical school, you are so busy learning your biochemistry and the names of these drugs and the bacteria. There's really no thought of faith-based. And then you go into private practice where you start to really learn how to become a doctor. But there are so many instances where a physician just gives you statistics on research. You hear people say, well, they have this type of cancer. The doctor said they had 3 months to live. And 3 years later, that person is still here. In science, we always want to give justification on how it happened. And I'll give you an example in her case where she was losing blood nonstop. And I remember looking everywhere because we wanted to know where it was coming from. We looked at the brain, the abdomen, the lungs, everywhere. Never found where it was coming from. But everybody kept saying, oh, she's hemolyzing, which is the fancy name of the red blood cells breaking down. Well, you should see it in the urine. That's how you know. She didn't have it in the urine. But in science, we don't want to say maybe things are happening we can't explain. And that's what I learned on this journey, that when I was going through it, though, your mind is so set on helping your patient that that's all you think of. And everybody's like, oh, like, God, help me figure this out. And then one day I sat back and started looking at everything that happened. And that's where you start to see that the faith and science came together in this case. Science, I moved nerves, I did this, I had a phenomenal team. I mean, it was like this team was put together for this. But I always say there's no way I'm this phenomenal surgeon who could accomplish putting nerves together and get her feel. It's almost like we got her to a certain point, and then the faith-based portion took over, who had been leading us, and now is like, I will finish this journey for you. So looking back on it, it is something that you can really, when you read the book, start to see that if you're in a waiting room and the doctor comes out and says, your loved one's going to the ICU, you don't know what's in store. But the book kind of shows you that there's a higher power that does stuff that we in medicine or we on earth can't explain.
How many other physicians have this connection with God and do have a strong faith? Because I think the general perception is not many.
That's a great question. It's almost a fine line that we as physicians look at to the fact of when do you bring the faith in or not. Prime example, do you pray with your patient before you go to surgery? And it's one of those things where as a physician, people don't want to upset somebody or do this. So you never really see when you're sitting around in a consultation that someone says, hey, let God take over, because you're ingrained that, we will use science to solve this. But hopefully, little by little, as we are getting more of the younger generation, we'll kind of break through that.
Well, we're going to take a quick break and continue our discussion with Dr. A.J. Seth, author of the amazing book, Rewired. It is a fantastic read, and we're going to tell you more details about his incredible surgery right after this. Stay with us. Welcome back to Healthy Living, and we're talking with Dr. A.J. Seth, author of the new book, Rewired, and the title is because you performed a surgery, an incredible surgery, on a patient, and she ended up needing a prosthetic, and it's incredible that she's actually able to feel her fingers and her hand, and talk about this incredible discovery that you really kind of almost stumbled upon when you were at a conference in Canada.
Correct. I happened to be at a conference and learned about, part of the surgery, which is phenomenal, allow the brain to move your hand, prosthetic hand. What I did was kind of just take it a step further so we could get her to feel, the hand, which is kind of an important thing. An amputee doesn't want to shake your hand because they don't feel it, so they don't know when to stop shaking, and they can literally crush a hand. So in her case, the amazing thing is that there's one arm in the world that can really move and feel. That's Johns Hopkins has it through DARPA, the government project. So when we went there, we were able to see how she can actually feel a styrofoam cup behind her back, and the amazing things she can do. She is so far ahead of technology, we can't catch up with her. And she can feel hot and cold. And what I did simply was just kind of rewired her body. We didn't implant anything, but we just put her nerves here. So her brain, when she takes a shower, her hand goes warm here. Or if you put an ice cube there, it goes cold. We were recently at a talk, and she was in an air-conditioned room really cold, and she's like, my hand is freezing. So it's so much farther than I ever thought we would get.
It's amazing. And she, sadly, unfortunately, you had to amputate her arm right here.
That's correct.
And but you preserved those nerves right there. How did you do that?
I didn't preserve them, actually. Here's the interesting thing. I had no idea I'd ever come back and do another surgery on her. I didn't even know that the surgery really existed. And then I stumbled upon it, and for some reason the nerves were perfectly set there for me to do that surgery. And it's one of those things that's those little small miracles that happened that basically got it to be in the right place.
A lot of our viewers are probably wondering how this poor woman ended up losing so much of her arm. And again, this is an amazing story. A raccoon bit her. And again, that's a serious thing, but not life-threatening in normal cases. But for her, it was the bacteria just was overwhelming, and then she got sepsis, which we all know is deadly, and she almost lost her life and instead ended up losing her arm. Tell us about Melissa's story.
Yeah, so unfortunately, she was separating an altercation between a raccoon and her dogs. She has a love of dogs, volunteers at the dog pound. It's an incredible love that she has, and wanted to save her dogs from the raccoon. Unfortunately, this small bite, which I thought was just your everyday regular animal bite, and it's not rabies, which everybody thinks. It was something that I just, in my entire career, have never seen anything like that. And it's something that I've never seen ravage and go up an arm and cause someone to be septic. And in her case, it unfortunately went that far where we had to amputate her arm, to save her life. And I give credit to her because she was able to deal with that adversity. She knew she had to lose her arm to save her life, but then not to stop there, saying that, we have the ability to help wounded warriors with this experimental surgery, and I'll prove that it can be done. And it kind of led onto this entire path.
Well, we're going to take a quick break and return with Dr. A.J. Seth, author of the new book, Rewired, and he's going to tell us the rest of the story and his amazing patient right after this. Welcome back to Healthy Living, and we're continuing our discussion with Dr. A.J. Seth, author of the book Rewired. And you were talking about your patient, Melissa Loomis. She had a horrible raccoon bite, and you were practicing in North Canton, Ohio, and you are an orthopedic surgeon specializing in the wrist and the elbow, and she was bitten in the wrist area.
Right, and that's how I got involved, thinking this is just a regular consult. I get consulted really very commonly for infections of the arm, people coming through cat bites in the ER. So it doesn't even faze me. I've been doing this, 15 years, and I think I've done 19,000 surgeries in my career. So it didn't even faze me. This is something. And then you get faced against that one battle that, as a physician, it's not easy to not win the battle. Through everything you've been through, you always feel like you're victorious, and then you get to that one case where it takes everything, every mind, every physical, emotional, to battle this infection, and that's what I felt I was up against.
Why did she have to lose her arm?
So, after 13 surgeries, I didn't want to admit that this infection was something that her body couldn't handle. And everybody said, you're going to end up amputating your arm. Well, it's easy for someone to say that, but the person who has to do it, because I change your life. I take away the arm when you can't open a jar, you can't tie your shoes. I'm going to do that. And finally, it got to the point where she was septic. And in the book, there's a great chapter she talks, and we put in about, I didn't even realize this, that she said for 2 days she said, I'm going to die, and this is what it feels like to die. I ended up having to amputate her because they said if you don't, within the next hour, the bacteria was going to just take over her body. And at that point, you put down your ego, you put down everything and say, okay, I've lost this battle. But the next battle started to save her life, and then we ended up on a course that supposedly made history.
I want to talk a little bit more about the prosthetic arm, which is a miracle, but a lot of our viewers are probably wondering, wait, she had a bacterial infection, why couldn't it be cured with antibiotics? Yeah,
that's a very good question. And I actually was just asked that by 2 or 3 doctors recently at a get-together we had. What was the bacteria, what was it? Most of the time, almost every time, if there's a bacterial infection, we take a culture, grows in the microbiology lab, and it says, okay, this is the bacteria, this is the drug that'll kill it. We're blessed in this country, we have the drugs, we can kill it. I took 20 cultures from her arm, and it never grew out a bacteria, a virus, fungal, anything. And here we are, we had her on 5 antibiotics, it wasn't working. We put her on another 5 antibiotics, it wasn't working. So we had no bacteria to tell what it is. We put her on every antibiotic that we have, and interestingly, she had a fever for 35 days, and we finally said, okay, we're going to stop the antibiotics. We can't, our medical aspect is not able to fix this. The day we stop the antibiotics, she goes home and never has a fever again.
Fascinating. And when you talk about sepsis, again, folks might not be so familiar with that, and how an infection in her arm could spread through her bloodstream, through her entire body, and kill her. I mean, sepsis is deadly.
It is, and an easy way I explain it is, if you imagine your whole body as arteries and veins, like railroad tracks. The bacteria jumped on a train in her arm, and it just went through her arteries, and it would make little stops, or train stops, like in her liver and kidneys. Bacteria jump off, boom, they start to hit the kidneys. And in her case, the bacteria hit the kidneys, then it hit the liver, and it'll just keep going on until your body's organs just cannot fight it anymore. And unfortunately, that's when a person can pass away.
And that's why the amputation was necessary, because this part was causing all the problems.
That's exactly right.
That portion of her arm. So then comes the miracle, which is the prosthetic, which is really mind-blowing, that she's actually able to feel the fingers and the hand, and you're talking about sensations and hot and cold and how tight she's gripping things. How did that come about?
Yeah, there's a video we have on our website. It's bionicmiracle.com. And you can actually see video of her doing these activities. And we ended up stumbling at a conference that a physician at Walter Reed sent us to. And basically, just to tell, there was a worldwide conference on how we did this surgery. And then we ended up getting connected with Walter Reed in the Advanced Applied Physics Laboratory, where they had her test the arm. And if you ask her, when they say, well, what changed by you having the surgery? And her response is, for 5 days I felt a life I could lead, because she was able to use that arm and function completely normal. Unfortunately, that arm is, like we said, made for military male. It's kept there, it's cost, it's funding. So that's where we are at, that we hope to bring this mainstream. Bring this type of a prosthetic where insurances will pay and cover. And so we've been trying to raise money and funding because we really think we have a new way of doing it.
Well, this is wonderful. We're going to take a quick break and continue our discussion with Dr. A.J. Seth, author of the book Rewired, and talk specifically about the implications for the military, because sadly we know that so many of our servicemen and women do suffer through amputation. So stay right with us. Welcome back to Healthy Living, continuing our discussion with Dr. A.J. Seth, author of the new book Rewired. And it's fascinating because the title says it all. This prosthetic is wired to the nerves of the patient so that she or he can actually have feeling in the hand, which is everything. She can hold her husband's hand and feel it.
Right.
And this has tremendous implications for our military servicemen and women who sadly undergo so many amputations.
One of the most common questions, and you're right on when you say that, is how did you take a risk of doing this surgery? And I always say, this is my job. I didn't take a risk. I mean, I did a surgery for one day. 19, 20, 21-year-olds are kissing their parents goodbye, their wives, and not even seeing sometimes their children born, so they can protect us, and they go overseas. And it's great because I can walk from my house to my car, and I don't have to worry about someone shooting me or stepping on a bomb, because our military is by far the best in the world.
Indeed.
The armor they wear is phenomenal now, but your extremities are still exposed. So people come back, and unfortunately somebody can lose an arm. And if you can imagine laying at Walter Reed Hospital, which is phenomenal, but you've lost your arm and you're 21 years old. You come home and you're a hero at war, and the whole town, you're in the parade and everybody looks at you heroes. Well, where are you 5 years? You don't have possibly a job, and you're with no money, and you're out there holding a sign that I'm a military veteran. And we drive right past them. And we say, don't be like that person. Well, 5 years ago they were a hero. So for me, if I could possibly obtain funding so I can get these arms just like she has, so they can go back to the workforce, even go back in the military, I would feel like I've accomplished something. And I think with this funding we're trying to get, it's the least we owe to our military troops.
Absolutely. So talk about how people can get involved, people who are moved by this story.
Right.
I hope everybody, I know I am.
We have a website called bionicmiracle.com. For 2 years, we've tried to get funding, and the hard part is that people look at me as being in a small town. And people don't think miracles happen in a small town. They don't think advancements in technology can happen in a small town, but it can. And for 2 years, we haven't raised any money. And we've been trying, and I will try for the next 20 years, because I think that I was given this opportunity and the skill to do it, but it shouldn't stop there. And I will continue for 20 years, and even if I raise $5, I will keep going. And we're just hoping, with great shows like this, when we come on, that there's somebody out there who gets touched by the story and, helps, even if you don't know any amputee, help the wounded warriors. Because in return, they're saving our lives. And so I've been on this path for 2 years, and I'll continue on it.
It's funny how you were going along in your life and something happened and you rose to the occasion. God basically put you there and now has created in your life a brand new purpose.
100%.
And talk about where the money goes specifically.
Yeah, so what we want to do is use money, and her and I work together. It's actually out of my house is our research lab. But the money is basically used to take what we have learned to make prosthetics. We know how to make it lighter. We know how to make it more usable because she tells me. Mm-hmm. And we have these ways because we want to make it so that it's functional. I often see, and I was just going through the terminal at the airport, saw 2 people without an arm. Oh. They don't wear a prosthetic because A, insurances don't cover them sometimes, but B, they are so cumbersome. And for her, she wears, she had 5 days of the most phenomenal prosthetic, but she goes back to the one she has and it doesn't work as well as this, so they don't use them. My goal is it may not look like the arm they had, but let's make it functional. Mm-hmm. And that will really, I think, change the future technology. So that's where we're hoping to get funding is let's, make these arms, let's test them and have people use them. And then my big thing is research is one thing. I want them out to mainstream market so they can afford them.
So you're working closely with Johns Hopkins and Walter Reed?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time predominantly with Johns Hopkins trying to advance it. Unfortunately, the funding there ran out. And so if we can get this funding, we can kick it back in because we were making some great progress. But just like all research, it takes time. But like me being this unlikely doctor, that's why we picked it, because how did he get paid? There will be a point, I think, where, okay, we're going to get that unlikely donation and we're going to make this out to be something that everybody can use.
At the very least, people can be praying for your success.
Thank you.
And for the right person to step forward for this
right.
very worthy cause. Dr. A.J. Seth, it's an amazing story, and you can read all about it in the book called Rewired. Thank you so much for being here, but also thank you so much for all your amazing work.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me, and also for helping us spread the word. I think you guys will help make a difference in not only her life, but other people with the amputations.
It's our pleasure. And we want to thank you for joining us for this edition of Healthy Living, and we'll see you again next time.